Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we're 473 days since the Islamist Hamas committed its atrocities against the state of Israel that essentially sparked a regional war between Israel and the chief culprit, the Islamic Republic of Iran. Nonetheless, many developments have occurred in the past 24 hours that we're going to focus in today's edition. And for that, we'll start with our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, give us the headers for today.
So around noontime, it seemed as if the major headline for today would be an operation conducted by the IDF in conjunction with Shabak, the Internal Security Agency, as well as the Border Police and various special forces in Janine, which is the terror hub of northern Samaria. The IDF spokesperson announced that following several terror acts and intelligence gathered about other such acts about to take place, the Central Command in Israel and the Judea and Samaria Division have started this major operation. But a couple of hours later came the major news of the day, and that is the double resignation at the top of the Israeli Defense Forces. Lieutenant General Halevi, he is the only serving lieutenant general at any one time, the chief of general staff. He outranks all other officers, announced that as of March the 6th, he will resign his position as the chief of general staff. That is about 2 years and 2 months after he assumed his office back in January of 2023. As he said, he bears the responsibility for the failures in the morning of October the 7th, as well as the successes of the IDF in the months which followed. He also needles the political echelon by noting that the military achievements have surpassed the guidance given by the politicians, and that whatever achievements have been made are chiefly those of the fighting forces. 25 minutes later, the commanding general of the Southern Command, Major General Yaron Finkelman, also announced his resignation. He did not give a date. Obviously, the incoming chief of staff would like to choose his successor, but there will now be a round of promotions as well as retirements in the high command. This is a piece of news which reverberates throughout Israeli society and government as we are speaking.
Absolutely. Well, let's turn to our expert today, no other than Brigadier General in Reserve Yossi Kupel-Vasil, formerly the Director General of the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs, the head of the IDF Intelligence Directorate's Research and Assessment Division, as well as currently the director of the IDSF, or Habitchonistim here in Israel, the director for the research department, as well as in the director for the Middle East Working Group in the Jerusalem Center for Defense and Security, among a long list of other positions. I don't know how you're able to push everything into your day-to-day schedule, but nonetheless, I still have a lot to learn from you, General. I'd like to ask you particularly on the resignation, first and foremost. Why now? And is this an indication that the IDF feels that this cessation of hostilities currently in the Gaza Strip is going to hold at least for the next couple of months? And if you can also draw from that to the current launch of an operation, Iron Wall is the label of this operation, even though we still don't know the English statement from the IDF on this. Therefore, we'll just use this tentatively until we get the full name. Go ahead, General.
Well, thank you for having me. Anyhow, yes, I think that announcement by General Halevi that he resigns is a very important step that indicates that the war has come to an end from his point of view. And that in the next stage of the war, if there is going to be any, he feels that he shouldn't be there. And he admits that he was responsible for the terrible mistake that led to the 7th of October massacre, and bears the responsibility. That's the right thing to do. I think it's an appropriate time, because it's true that the war has reached a certain stage that is a turning point. This hostage deal is a turning point in the war. And if you look at what he said in his announcement, I think he pointed out to the most interesting difference of understanding of what is the war mission between him and the political echelon. He refers to dismantling of Hamas, Peruk in Hebrew, and whereas the order given to him by the government was mitut, which was destroying Hamas. And he repeatedly sticks to this dismantling description of his mission. And because of that, he believed that by doing what the IDF has done so far in Gaza, this is a performing of the order given to him by the government. So he knows the difference between Peruk, between dismantling and destroying. And he said, I am in favor of dismantling Hamas, primarily from a military point of view. I managed to dismantle the frameworks of Hamas, the fighting frameworks of Hamas, but I'm not going to destroy Hamas, because this is something that is too much for the IDF to do. It's going to be too costly in human loss and in the price, the financial price of taking over the Gaza Strip, or at least taking over the distribution of humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip. And that is the difference between what the government wants to see happening in the next stage and between what he considers to be the appropriate goal. I think this made him realize that he has done what he thought should have been done, and he can go home. And he, of course, takes with him the glory of the successes of the IDF and the security system after October 7th. We did very good, very well. Very impressive operation in Gaza, even more impressive operation in Lebanon, a very successful defense vis-a-vis the Iranian attacks on April and October, a very impressive attack on Iran on late October that followed the attack, the Iranian attack. From all of these points, he can say that the military that he has prepared for these operations was successful, and yes, he made a mistake, a terrible mistake that justifies his resignation, but he compensated some of it by the brilliant performance of the army ever since then.
Indeed. Well, he did implement also the vision that was laid out by his predecessor, Lieutenant General in Reserve Aviv Kochavi, in quite masterfully, which I must say was very impressive to behold. But nonetheless, there was significant daylight, naturally, between the security cabinet on the one hand to the defense establishment on the other, that also brought to Netanyahu's decision to fire his defense minister, Yoav Gallant, who was there for quite some time, and put there the incumbent or the current defense minister, Israel Katz. Things that, of course, there are plenty of nuances that can be studied and discussed extensively. But nonetheless, we do have still a long list of issues. And let's focus one moment on Janine, because naturally, the Islamic Republic of Iran has collapsed in Lebanon. It has collapsed in Syria, collapsed in the Gaza Strip to a certain degree. and now it is also the once again the focal point in the efforts by Israel to eradicate its influence, and both militarily, fiscally, and others in Judea and Samaria. To what degree is the Palestinian Authority involved in this, since they have also launched their own operation for the last several days, several weeks, if I may, in an attempt to try and convince the international community that they're competent enough to provide some sort of guarantee to the Gaza Strip. But nonetheless, it seems like they haven't been very successful, which is an understatement, if I may add.
So late last week, a deal has been reached between Israel and Hamas through the mediation of the United States, Egypt, and Qatar on the ceasefire and mutual release, reciprocal release of Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners and detainees. And this caused repercussions. One of those was the resignation of Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, who apparently is now beside himself because the moment he left, the very moment his resignation took effect, 48 hours after submitting the letter, the operation in Janine started, and he will have no credit in it. He always called for even bigger operations, but now he's out of the picture.
Which raises the question whether or not he knew about this pending operation.
Regardless, he had to leave because of his political electorate. He couldn't stay in, but his rival, Bezalel Smotrich, obviously enjoys the fact that he's in and Ben-Gvir is out. But another implication was that the first batch of Palestinian prisoners to be released into the West Bank and East Jerusalem, others will go on exile later. But these 90 or so prisoners had the Hamas prestige go up in the territories because not all the prisoners are affiliated with Hamas. Hamas, in effect, took care of Fatah prisoners. Fatah is the mainstay of the Palestinian Authority, and therefore, in the competition between the authority and Hamas, the terrorists could gain. Therefore, there is a mutual interest between the Palestinian Authority and Israel to preempt whatever terror wave was about to take effect as part of the pride and joy of the Palestinians at what they see as a major achievement in getting the release of the prisoners. So while it was not a mutual or a collaboration between the Israelis and the Palestinian Authority, nevertheless, the interests converge.
Indeed. Just to highlight, those 90 we're speaking about have engaged in terror activities, but the people who they attacked were either wounded or the attack itself failed, and therefore they were permitted to go to Judea and Samaria rather than elsewhere. If their victims were killed, in fact, they would not have being permitted to go there. But General, I'd like to shift gears to Lebanon. The current ceasefire remains fragile. Hezbollah continues to breach the outline of the cessation of hostilities time and again, forcing Israel to enforce the ceasefire. UNIFIL seems to provide some type of oversight and assistance to the Lebanese armed forces, but what can you tell us about it with regard to the sustainability of the ceasefire at large?
First of all, just a word about the Palestinian Authority and the terrorists in the northern Samaria area. The activities of the Palestinian Authority were in no way meant to prevent the terrorists from carrying out terror attacks against Israel. They were concerned that this is that they are challenging their ability to govern the area. That was their concern, and Hamas was challenging them. And that's what led them to carry out the operation against the terror groups in Janine. And eventually they reached an agreement that allows them to keep carrying out attacks against Israel. That's where we stand. That's even encouraging them to carry out attacks. That's where we stand. So we shouldn't misunderstand the incentive that led the Palestinian Authority to take to the arms against the terrorists in northern Samaria. About Lebanon, we have only a very short time left before a couple of days before the full implementation of the task of the Lebanese army should be carried out on the ground. And it seems that they are making progress, but nobody knows whether they're going to be ready to assume responsibility all over the territory that was taken by Israel during the war. The situation is going to be very tense because if they don't, Israel will have to stay there, even though the 60 days of the ceasefire are going to come to an end. That this period was supposed to be used in order for the Lebanese army to redeploy and for the Israeli forces to withdraw, which is not clear whether it's going to happen or not. Anyhow, we are advancing into a new situation where it's not UNIFIL that's going to be responsible for monitoring the situation and then making sure that Hezbollah is not present in the south. It's the Lebanese army, and if the Lebanese army doesn't do it, then it's going to be the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, that are going to be monitoring the situation. If they have a reason to believe that Hezbollah is coming back, or that Hezbollah is rearming and regrouping, even north of the Litani, then they will be allowed, after briefing the committee that is supervising the implementation of the agreement, they will be able to carry out military operations against this threat that is emanating from these territories. This is a totally different situation than the one that prevailed until October 6th, or until October 8th, as a matter of fact. And we are entering a totally new situation that it's not clear whether Hezbollah would be able to live with it. They are weak. They are still recovering from the big suffering that they went through during the war. But again, this is something that is going to put forward a very important challenge in front of them. And I don't know, I'm not sure that they are going to be able to let it pass.
Mr. Owen, I'd like to ask you, since President Trump yesterday during the inauguration, or actually after the inauguration, when he was signing the executive orders, cast doubt over whether or not the ceasefire in Gaza would hold. With regard to Lebanon, he's been a lot more vocal about the necessity to reach a ceasefire during his campaign period, and he did appoint the father-in-law of his daughter, who is a Lebanese from Bulu's family, of course, as the new U.S. envoy for the Arab world, somebody who was born in Lebanon, grew up in Texas, but nonetheless, he grew up, he returned to Lebanon, even tried to run there in parliament without much success, but he has a clear affection towards Lebanon in this context. And within this context of both the war between Israel and Hamas, the war between Israel and the Iranian proxy Hezbollah, does the Trump administration's grand strategy for the Middle East, so to speak, which has yet to be unveiled, so this is speculative at best, is it going to challenge Israel's efforts to further eradicate Iran's axis, particularly when talking about Lebanon in this case?
So personalities do matter, but usually only when it comes to leaders. We had Philip Habib, we had George Mitchell, both of them of Arab and particularly Lebanese descent. Also John Sununu, who used to be President Bush Sr. Chief of Staff. And we had Amos Hochstein of Israeli descent. It doesn't really matter. The emissaries, the mediators, they can add some flavor, but interests matter, and the way leaders can interact with each other. And you are right. The grand strategy of the Trump administration is yet to be formulated and declared. we have seen what the nominees for senior positions, such as Marco Rubio, who has already been confirmed, and Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense, yet to be voted on by the Senate, they hedged their bets. All they had was something very similar to the first Trump administration, which came out with the national strategy under Secretary of Defense Mattis, and the Biden administration, in essence, only continued this policy of the first Trump administration. Now, is there going to be a break in the second Trump administration from the previous 8 years? Of course, remains to be seen. Right now, the supreme authority here in the region is General Michael Eric Kurilla, the commanding general of CENTCOM, who has been recently to Israel, Lebanon, Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, the entire area. His former counterpart, General Joseph Aoun, was for 7 years the commander of the Lebanese army. By the way, it's a much better job than being the commander of Israel's army. You serve for as long as you want, unless you are promoted to be president. You don't have to fight. You cannot fail because you don't do a lot. But now this is going to be General Aoun's challenge. Again, too soon. We are only into the second day of this administration. They have other priorities: the border, deportation, China, Greenland, Canada. The Middle East is somewhere down the list.
Well, I beg to differ. I think the Middle East is a significant factor of the current administration, since they do view the Iranian issue as a global issue rather than a local Middle Eastern issue. And for that, General Kupevas, I'd like to ask your take on the current Trump administration entering into office. Of course, the first foreign policy with regard to any global issue is going to be devised by the National Security Council that is not subject to confirmation, and therefore it's going to take the lead at least in the first 100 days until everybody are going to take their positions. We already know who are taking the various posts under, of course, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, formerly a congressman who was quite open about the positions that he and Trump spoke about with regard to the Middle East also, but also broader than that. Within this framework, what are we to expect in your informed analysis with regard to the Islamic Republic of Iran at large? And let's also speak about Syria for a moment, where the jihadist, al-Qaeda-linked Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is consolidating or attempting to consolidate its power in Damascus via support from Qatar and Turkey.
Well, President Trump, I think, understands that the Middle East is a major arena that has to be dealt with. Yes, he wants to make sure that he doesn't open new wars, and his main goal, I guess, is going to be promoting the normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. That's the holy grail, and everybody's trying to make it happen, and so far without big success. There was some progress with the signing of the Abraham Accords. Saudi Arabia gave their acquiescence to that, but direct normalization was not taking place. And now this is the next stage. I think his main effort is going to be on that, and everything else is going to be seen through this lens. And the second issue is making sure that Iran doesn't have the capability to produce nuclear weapons. Now, I think this is where we're going to see some change with the former policies of the American administration. Whereas in the past, the Americans were saying Iran should not have or should not obtain nuclear weapons. I think, but that this new administration that is much more aggressive vis-a-vis Iran is going to say, no, the Iranians should not have the capability to produce nuclear weapons. That is something different, and I think that it's going to be translated into more pressure on Iran that may eventually also lead to some kinetic action by Israel that's going to be supported by the United States. not tomorrow morning. I wouldn't expect it to happen tomorrow morning, though there are some people in the government, in the administration, that would like to see it happening immediately. But I think that Trump is going to use the economic pressure now to see whether he can make some progress towards this goal through diplomatic means, with the waiving of the credible military option that Israel created for the Americans by the attack in October, in order to convince the Iranians to show more flexibility. I saw already Zarif speaking in this direction and emphasizing the importance of lifting the sanctions. The question is what Iran is going to be ready to pay in order to lift the sanctions. And this is a major question that we haven't heard yet the Iranians referring to it. Of course, they're not going to say much in public. It's going to be behind closed doors. Syria is another arena. I would say that the entire group of players that are under the radical Muslim Sunni group, Turkey, Qatar, Syria, is an area that the government, that the administration has not yet decided what kind of policy they want to adopt vis-a-vis these players, especially Syria. It's interesting that the leader of Syria, Ahmed Shara, has already congratulated President Trump upon his assuming office, and has said that he's ready to see cooperation and looking forward to cooperate with the United States under Trump. I believe that eventually, as in the previous term, Trump was going to show some readiness to negotiate with this group, with these members, and try to build working relations with them. And he doesn't look for a new escalation in Syria, definitely not. He's going to try to find a way to work out a deal between the Kurds and the Turks. And it's not going to be easy, because the Turks feel that they are emboldened by what happened and the way they took control of Syria. But I think Trump is going to make an effort in this respect, and use the credit that he has now, right now, as forceful and successful in working out a deal between Israel and Hamas, in order to work out a deal also between Turkey and the Kurds, Turkey and Shara vis-a-vis the Kurds.
General Kuperwasser, Mr. Oren, thank you so very much for all of your insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.